You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I got a question for all of you. Is Syracuse basketball going to make the NCAA tournament this season? Leave a comment in the comment section below if you think that Syracuse basketball will make the tournament this year. All right? It's been 3 years. 3 years for this team, and I think I can speak for most, if not all of you, that it's time. It's time for Syracuse basketball to get back in the NCAA tournament. This is year 2 of Adrian Autry, all right? This is a better roster, in my opinion, on paper. And last year, for what it's worth, they won 20 regular season games for the first time since 2013-14. The progress is there. They didn't play in the NIT last year, but they qualified for the NIT. They just said before it was released that they didn't want to play in it. Right? So if you're an NIT team, you're not that far from being an NCAA tournament team. Here's the deal. When will we know? Are they a tournament team or are they not a tournament team? All right? And maybe it's unfair to say that we will know early on in the season, right then and there, that this is a tournament team, but it's my thought. This is my thought process, because last year there was an indicator to me whether or not Syracuse basketball would be better. I didn't necessarily expect them to make the tournament last year, but were they going to be better than the years prior? And that was the Colgate game. I believe it was the third game of the season, and Colgate had our number the past few years, but Syracuse, they came back from a 20-plus point deficit in the second half to defeat Colgate last year. It was a great win. So they kind of got that monkey off their back. And look, the results were there at the end that they won 20 games in the regular season. Evidently, they were a better team than the prior couple of years. They do play Colgate again. It's the second game of the season, I want to say. I believe they start with Lemoyne, then they got Colgate, and then they got Youngstown State. Those are the first 3 regular season games. Assuming they beat Colgate, and that's not really an assumption. They could lose to Colgate. They've lost to Colgate before. They should be 3-0, right? Let's be optimistic. Let's be optimistic here. They're 3-0, okay? Well, then there's the 4th game of the season, and I think this is where we'll really know. Maybe we won't know, but we'll have a good idea of how good Syracuse basketball is. And that's when they play Texas at the Barclays Center, okay, in the Legends Classic. We'll really see how much progress this team has made. Texas right now is 19th in the preseason AP poll, so they are a pretty damn good team. This is a team that should be in the tournament once again. Syracuse against tournament teams last season, okay? I charted them all. They played 13 games against NCAA tournament competition last year. Here were the results, all right? Syracuse went 5-8 in those games. Doesn't really sound great, but it also doesn't sound terrible, but actually it's worse than what you might think. 5-8. Here's why. Number one of those games was against Colgate. Colgate only gets into the tournament because they have to win their conference. If they win their conference, they're in. If they finish second in the conference, they are out. They are a mid-major team. So do I really kind of count that as a tournament team? Sure, they made it, but they could have easily lost their conference championship game, and then they're not, right? Then the other 2 wins, here's our 2 wins right here, were against NC State in the regular season last season. Before the Wolfpack got hot. The Wolfpack got hot in March. And we saw in the 3rd game what happened. When the 2 squads, they played in the ACC tournament, and NC State destroyed us. It was really not a competitive game in the second half. Right? But, to Syracuse's credit, that was a tournament team technically, and they ended up having a Cinderella run to the Final Four. But really, during the regular season when Syracuse was playing them, that was not really a tournament team. Okay? They were 5-8, and it's really not as good as what that might say. Now, you do have to give Syracuse credit for beating North Carolina at home. That was a big win last year. And they also beat Oregon in a neutral site last year, which was really an impressive win. Oregon had a lot of injuries, but Syracuse still beat them by 20 points. So you got to give Syracuse a little bit of credit for that. All right. Here's where the kicker is, okay? Here's the kicker. In the 8 losses that Syracuse had against tournament teams last year, they lost by an average of nearly 20 points. Just think about that. Let it marinate. When they played against tournament competition and they lost, they typically got blown out. They lost by an average of nearly 20 points a game. There was only one loss that was within single digits, and that was the first game against Clemson, which was a home game. That's it. So what do I want to see? What is the overall point with what I am telling you here? Texas should be a tournament team this season, and maybe they just fall flat on their face and they're not. So, and we won't know that until really the season is played. But let's assume they are a tournament team. I think at minimum, you have to expect that Syracuse looks good in that game, that they look competitive in that one. A win would be great. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that Syracuse on a neutral site beats Texas. It can happen. Okay? But let's say Syracuse loses 74-71 on a buzzer beater. Now, I'm sure in the post-game for that one, I'm going to be pissed. But at the same time, right now at this very moment, okay, that'll look good on the net rankings. And remember, the net matters. And I think we would know, even with like a 3-point buzzer beater loss to a team like Texas, that I think Syracuse basketball is going to be pretty good, right? And then there's the flip side. You get blown out by 30 points. So you might be asking yourselves, is this here we go again? I think that's my point. That's my point. At least be competitive against Texas. 4th game of the season. Let's see where they are really at. That is a measuring stick game for Syracuse basketball. We will have a good idea of how good or maybe not good this team is after that game. Hopefully, they can do well, maybe even win, maybe even pull off a stunner. They pulled off a couple stunners last year, beating North Carolina. Let's hope they can do that with Texas.